Welcome to the PharmaSource podcast. I'm joined on the podcast today by Julien Laizé, Director of External Manufacturing CTM at Valneva. Valneva, a French-based specialty vaccine company with a healthy pipeline that develops, manufactures and commercializes vaccines for infectious diseases, addressing unmet medical needs. Julien's career takes him from Novo Nordisk and Eli Lilly to where he is now, at an innovative biotech where he's covering everything from preclinical to full commercialization. Julien, welcome to the podcast today.
Thank you for welcoming me. It's a pleasure to have this interview with you. Thank you.
You've had quite an interesting journey from Big Pharma at those companies, as I mentioned, Novo and Lilly, to your current role at Valneva. What drove that journey for you, and how are you finding the transition from Big Pharma to a perhaps more entrepreneurial type of environment?
That's a very good question, because transitioning from a well-established giant Big Pharma like Novo Nordisk and Eli Lilly to a smaller and more entrepreneurial setting like Valneva was really for me a wish to embrace innovation and agility. Because as you know, Big Pharma, yes, it is well established, but bureaucracy, heavy organization is not the place where you can be risk-taking entrepreneur or to focus on agility if you have ideas to make that real. So in larger organization, when you proceed as well-defined process, it can sometimes limit rapidly your decision making or your creativity. At Valneva, smaller companies like that, you need to be more entrepreneur, as I told you, more to define everything as well, to create the things and to be in an environment where you need to bring ideas and that can be swiftly implemented. So you will like that, I want to say your life has much more meaning. It's much more meaningful because you have a direct impact on the reality, on the public health as well. Yeah.
Interesting. Could you give any examples of that, please? What that would look like within, like, I guess, time to make decisions, perhaps within Big Pharma, and versus how it is where you're at now. What does that sort of look like in real terms?
I will give you an example when I was in Big Pharma at Eli Lilly. So when I joined Eli Lilly, I was 27, and immediately when I joined my department, so I was already in external manufacturing, I proposed an idea, to change the workflow in the department. And this idea could make an economy in the department of $300,000. So for a beginner, just there for 2 months, it was nice, And I want to say, so first of all, I needed to make a kind of form of submission for my ID, to approve that with my manager, and then to bring that to a committee, a board of directors. And I want to say I had in front of me kind of 10, 12 directors who commented my ideas and my project. I also need to justify my ideas. And at the end, 2 directors blocked my idea, and they said, your idea at the end, it's a supply chain idea. You are technical at the moment. You should never suggest such idea. So just to give you an example, how you can, even if it is efficient, sometimes I want to say the structure and I want to say the code of the code of conduct, or what you need to do in your job description, is more important than the efficiency. In small companies like at Valneva, it's really, you have objectives, you have global objectives, help yourself. And at the end, the more important is that it's achieved. And whatever you do at the end, I won't say it's not important. You can do whatever you want, but at the end, the most important it is, I don't know, I have a project to scale up a process from preclinical till clinical phase 1, and the goal it is select the CDMO, manage the budget, please do that on time. If it is efficient, I will see nobody, basically.
And how has your leadership approach had to adapt then in going from Big Pharma to a specialist company of around 800 people? Are there different rhythms, different communication styles? How does that work in practice?
Definitely, yes. Moving into a leadership role within smaller organization, it's an evolution in my approach. In larger companies, leadership often it involves navigating through complex hierarchies, and established protocols. So sometimes I would say your leadership role needs to be adapted in how you communicate that, how you bring the ideas, to whom you communicate your ideas, and which procedure you have respected at the end. At Valneva, leadership is more hand-on, if I can say that word. It's require more sometimes balance between providing clear responsibilities, because of course I have answer below me manager, senior manager, but they need to have clear responsibilities, but in the meantime you need freedom for delivering, because no, we are building something at the end in such organization. So at the end, if something pop up, we need to adapt ourselves and to find a solution a little bit. And it's far away different the approach where everybody works in silo between department and everything is well defined. So I don't say it's not that it's a disorganization. It's much more a balance between job description and innovation and freedom as well. So this means as well it could be very interesting for people in such organization, because you constantly learn, and depending on what you can deliver, what you can do, you can get new functions as well, new responsibilities. So I would say empowering, I want to say ownership for the project. We need to empower, the ownership, but we need to maintain the open line of communication. And sometimes it is really informal. So in Big Pharma, sometimes the formality when you communicate is more important. There, sometimes it is, I see myself between CDMO or between my partners. Sometimes you call them on WhatsApp and it is, we solve the situation like that. And it is really the efficiency, which is the more important. So I want to say in practice, it will involve really in a small organization, cross-functional meeting, what we call matrix team environment, cross-functional between different kind of departments. In Big Pharma, you will be much more in silo finally, and sometimes you only work in your department, people from engineering, people from quality. Sometimes you have one or two departments, but nothing more. In a smaller organization, biotech like Valneva, you really need to understand who is doing what, and if as well a problem pop-ups, who to contact exactly. Because of course it's very risky to take the decision. Sometimes you need to know who to contact on this moment and what is important. So at the end you have a broader view on the pharmaceutical industry itself. I think that if you work in Big Pharma and you work all your life, for example in finance or in preclinical, at the end you don't even know what other departments are doing at the end. There, you really need to have cross-functional leadership, fostering on culture of transparency, and you need to balance between risk-taking, which drive innovation, and I want to say to control, I want to say to mitigate the risk with, I want to say what we call the cross-functional approach. Yeah.
One of the things I always think is most interesting about biopharma is that tension which exists between risk taking. The greatest discoveries in history come from experimentation, the scientists who are taking risks, and then also, of course, the need for rigorous compliance, quality, and safety for the drugs that people are putting into their bodies. How do you get that balance right? So this more free-flowing environment that you're talking about, how do you get the right balance between innovation and risk management when we're talking about vaccine development? What's the right balance?
I want to say you are completely true when you say that most of the innovation in human history, they were sometimes random and sometimes because people took the risk as well. I want to say, and it's how in pharma industry the innovation is driven. You will test 100 testing at the end. 99 of them will fail, but one of them will be a blockbuster. And it's how it is. And it is an approach that sometimes, that's why, Big Pharma now, they prefer to allocate their resources for early phase of research and development to smaller structure, because the risk taking, it's an approach that is completely different in Big Pharma. It's really to not take any risk. I'll say I can give you some examples in the history. So you mentioned vaccines, but Louis Pasteur, his first vaccine, it was a huge risk taking when he started the vaccination. Or sometimes we wonder that scientific discovery, it's really by intuition as well. And sometimes it's not following a pure plan. Just an example, Fleming, when he discovered the penicillin at the end, it was because he was a very dirty guy in his lab, and randomly he discovered the penicillin. So it's sometimes that what I am telling you, I am not telling you a moral judgment, it is good or it is bad, just I am telling you that this kind of approach is not this one in Big Pharma, and that's why now they prefer to allocate their resources in early phase to smaller structures, smaller biotech, who are more driven by the risk, more driven by innovation, because they know that internally the bureaucracy and the mindset will completely kill the creativity, kill the intuition that is really needed for the discovery. And I want to say, that's why, just an example, during the pandemic, you have seen that Pfizer, they have collaborated with BioNTech, Oxford University, with, AstraZeneca with Oxford University, excuse me. So I want to say the risk-taking in biotech, it's, I want to say we need to balance between innovation with risk management. So of course we are innovative, but it doesn't mean that we do completely, I would say, completely disorganized movements. We implement rigorous framework that allows exploration for novel approach. And we need to adhere to the regulatory standard, I want to say. But I want to say we have freedom without that. So the most important is that we have guidelines, we follow the regulatory compliance standards. But I want to say below that, people will be authorized to test, to create at the end. And that's why it includes clinical trials, continuous monitoring, external manufacturing, and adaptive project management strategy. So I would say when you can ensure both safety and efficacy into your vaccines candidate, that's the right approach to innovate. So I would say it's a kind of balance, but you cannot, what I want to insist is that at the end, you cannot measure everything. It is a lot of time. We have graph, we have, I want to say, risk assessment that shows the risk if we go in this approach or in this other one, but you cannot calculate everything. So at the end, it is really based on the experience of the leader, and depending on, I don't want to say how we feel the situation, because it should be not rational, but based on, I'll say, a little bit a sense of a scientific sense, or a business sense that helps you to take the right decision at the moment.
Thank you. Let's talk about your experience in managing global partnerships. So how do you go about identifying the different partners you're going to collaborate with? And I wonder if there's any examples you could share of current collaborations you're currently working on.
At Valneva, we have two kind of collaboration. So we have the typical collaboration through CDMO, where we need from preclinical till commercialization to find external partners, external CDMO. So I want to say for that, the selection process is, we often say that in pharma that yes, we have a scorecard to select them. So depending on the project, depending on the timelines, we need to evaluate several CDMO that will assess according to several key purchasing criteria. So I can mention a couple of them. So customer relationships, so very important because 50% of your success rate with a CDMO is depending on the customer relationship. It's really if the CDMO is flexible, if the CDMO they understand your project, they are motivated to work with you, and as well, it's not only a kind of vendor approach, but it's really a partner at the end. And I can tell you that sometimes you can have a good CDMO in terms of quality and technical, but if the relationship is not there, it can be a disaster.
How do you evaluate that before you actually sign a contract? Because, technical criteria is easier, of course. They can either do it or they can't. But
Yeah.
when it comes to this relationship and how you're going to work in future, how do you try to assess that before you sign up?
That's a very good question because we cannot put a notation finally on something that could be subjective at the
Mm,
end. However, I'll say that first of all the pharma industry is extremely small. Everybody knows everybody. We see each other during conference, so it's a very small world. And I can tell you that a lot of decision in the pharma industry is based on the reputation. So first of all, we interview our network, how they behave in real project. Oh, you work with this partner for so many years. How is
mm,
it? Blah blah. And as well, it is based on their past track, what they did in the past. They were not only successful, but how they behave. So really, the reputation and what you did in the past is a good indicator because if I want to say I will discuss with major vaccines, I want to say head of external manufacturing, and they say, for example, this one from GSK, this one from Merck, and they all tell me this partner will be extremely difficult. And if you hear always the same background around them, that's not really good, even if they promise something to you. Then you have that, first of all. Then, as well, it is the partner, it's how they behave in the contract with you, how they are in, I would say, first step when you requested the quotation, when you go to your first business and technical meeting during the assessment, how they are. Are they open to you? For example, their site presentation, when you visit them, how they behave as well.
mm,
And the site visit, it is the first time that you work with them, it's something that is absolutely crucial because what is more important sometimes it's not with the people you discuss with, but it is
mm,
between corridors. So you need to assess how it is between corridors to look to operators, how they work. For example, do they seem a little bit under stress, etc. So all these kind of indicators that notice allows you to make a judgment. But it is true that at the end, that the notation that you will make cannot be completely objective.
mm,
It's as a part of subjective as well because it's a little bit like I want to say I will give you an image, but the relationship um, with CDMO, it's a little bit like in a couple. It's how you feel with them at the end. Do you think that you can give them your project or not? That's the basic question that we need to answer. So yeah, we have all these criteria. So as I told you, commercial relationship, reputation, quality, technical skills, etc. And pricing, of course, supply chain. Now sustainability is becoming extremely important as well. So we have all these criteria to select a basic partner, and we make the decision based on a notation and based on an assessment at the end.
mm.
However, you know that at Valneva as well, we are very often, like a lot of vaccines company, financed by non-governmental institutions. So typical example, it is CEPI, which is from the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation,
Okay.
And I don't say they finance us, but they say, yes, but in counterpart, you need to transfer your technology to LMIC partners, so LMIC low and middle income countries. And I would say they will give you a list of potential partners, and into that list, you will need to select a potential partner that can be in Brazil, that can be in India, etc. So into that contract, we have selected you can see that in the newspaper. It's public for our chikungunya vaccine, Instituto Butantan in Brazil, and it's a kind of Institut Pasteur, but for South America. It's how to say. I was there several times. It's a city within the city. You have 6,000 people on the site, so it's really a major vaccine producer, and we work with them. So you need to, in this kind of contract, to select based on suggestion, but as well to manage, how to say, the cross-cultural aspect, because sometimes you, I would say, between, so Valneva is French-Austrian, but between a European company and a South American company, it's completely different. So, and another example, we just signed an agreement with SII, so Serum Institute of India, which is the biggest vaccine producer in the world, and same it is for our chikungunya vaccines, where we extend the footprint. So it is typically example that we have, and otherwise at Valneva, for our, I would say, for the part where we are, we supply the Western countries, we try to stay in Europe or in US basically for our CDMO. Yeah.
So you just called out a couple of countries there. So working in Brazil, working in India, what kind of cultural differences do you experience as part of that? How much of a consideration is that with the types of strategic collaborations that you're striking?
Communication with your partner is 50% of your success rate, and it is even more complex with partners that are completely different culturally from you. So I want to say the first thing it is, I'll say, we often say that we need to work on emotional intelligence, but I want to emphasize that it's as well general culture, because you need to understand to whom you speak, and to how they behave, what are their, answer their history. And sometimes people, if they have such behavior in such countries, is because they had such history in the past. And for example, if you know the history of Brazil, the history of India, you can understand why even in their structure, how they organize, why they behave so differently. So I will give you an example. You know that in this kind of structure, like in Brazil, sometimes in South America, you have very bureaucratic and very slow, I would say, organization or decision making. If you understand that in the past, first of all, they were colonized, and when they were colonized, the structure was completely feudal. And when the Portuguese for Brazil they left, the same structure are always the same in those countries. So it means that they never really change from past organization, and now it's how they are organized and their mindset basically. So, and as well, if I can tell you that on emotional intelligence, you need to not judge. So if people sometimes they behave a little bit different than you, it's not because they are bad or they want to do a bad job. It's just because they are culturally different. An example for Brazil, I would say they are not like, for example, as I told you, Valneva is French-Austrian. So when I sit in Austria, people are very strict regarding the timelines. It's really a matter of respect. It's really very important for them. To be on time, etc. In Brazil, it's completely different. Sometimes you can wait, and for them, they will smile, and it's not important. So if you are like, I'll say, thinking like an Austrian, and you want to say, "Oh, you didn't respect that, you were not on time," etc. All the people from Brazil, they will close themselves, and they will say, "Why is so strict with us? He's not nice," etc. However, if you accept that sometimes they are a little bit delayed, not really rigorous, you can get more outcomes than if you work like a typical French or Austrian focusing on the timelines. So it's really, you need to understand people and to not judge them. It's the most important thing.
I interviewed recently Luis Barberini from Bayer working in Brazil, and he was talking about a very similar thing. He was talking about the big cultural gap that exists between head office in Germany and what it's like on the ground in Latin America, and basically saying very similar thing that you really have to adapt yourself to the local culture in order to get results.
Mhm. It's a very good remark, and I think that everybody working in such a multicultural environment, first of all, will notice that, and for him, it will be an occasion to grow. Because finally you think outside the nationalities, outside the cultural gap, and at the end maybe it's a little bit shocking what I will tell you, but in such culture, sometimes there is no truth or false. They are just characteristic, and you need to adapt to them.
Yes. What about when it comes to developing vaccines for lower income countries? Does that come with its own challenges and opportunities?
It presents unique challenges because sometimes, I want to say, first of all, there is a cultural gap, as we mentioned.
Hmm.
But sometimes, some people they think that I some countries from low and middle income countries they have limited infrastructure. However, I mentioned to you in CEPI what they suggest to us it's really big manufacturer. For
Mhm.
example, SII, Butantan, it's really big. Their infrastructure are really good, and I can tell you that I'd say even I'd say much better than in some European or US sites. However, it's possible that sometimes in such countries you have limited infrastructure if you are not looking for the I would say the biggest one or the smaller one, and it's not only limited in terms of infrastructure, but for the factory itself, but what is around. So what is the road state? So just an example, you know that
Mhm.
sometimes you need to supply via your truck, via route, your vaccines, and you know that when the state of your road is completely disaster with a hole everywhere. I don't say when you have I don't say millions of vaccines in glasses and packed like that, it can be a major problem because you can break your vaccines, etc. So I want to say very often we engage this very often with local communities and the partner itself to understand their specific needs. And the most important when you collaborate with this kind of LMIC countries, it's really that you have a relationship held by global health organization to assure the accessibility and affordability of the vaccines, because very likely if this kind of non-governmental institution they don't finance us, for a western company like us it will be very difficult to transfer our products. So if you are not supported for the selection of your partner and for the finance, it could be extremely difficult. So you need to, and as well, even for you mentioned Bayer, because it's a big company, so they have affiliates in Brazil, affiliates in Germany, of course. But sometimes affiliates they don't really understand their needs, and the communication is not great. And I want to say sometimes the communication line in low and middle income countries can be quite difficult. So before you start a project, you need to be sure that you have as well partners there, that you have the right level of communication with them, and that internally you have dedicated people for these LMIC partners, because it's not everybody who can deal in multicultural environment, etc.
Maybe we could turn our attention west then. For Valneva, a significant percentage of your turnover comes from the United States.
Mhm.
In fact, congratulations, I should say. There was just a couple of weeks ago, there was an announcement that you've signed a $32.8 million contract with the US Department of Defense for your encephalitis vaccine, Ixiaro. Congratulations on that, first of all. How are you preparing for the year ahead, working in the US, with all the political shifts which are happening at the moment with the new administration, a new regime coming in for the FDA, the Biosecure Act, so much change is going on. How are you currently thinking about that?
That's a very good question because US are driving everything in the pharmaceutical industry,
Hmm.
not only in terms of business but in terms of regulatory because FDA is the most advanced regulatory agency. So, and I would say it's the key state for all the innovation. So really, when US are deciding about something, it impacts the whole pharma industry.
Yep.
I want to say that for US now, it's a major change. All the political change that we have seen. Uh, I don't want to make politics, and it's not my role. But first of all, the US. For a couple of years, I want to say 10 years ago, 20 years ago, they became even between Democrats or conservative, more and more conservative. So we often mention the Biosecure Act, as you know. So this Biosecure Act it has been raised by a Biden administration, but
Mhm.
Trump will continue that, and soon it will become a law. And basically, what it says that we need to exclude all Chinese CDMO and partner if we want to market in United States. So that's a major change.
Would that cause issues for you with your current footprint?
No, for us it won't, but for
Mhm.
our future choice, it will make a decision because you know that
Yep.
partners like, I don't want to mention the name, but some partner in China, I would say 20 years ago, they were very cheap, but the quality level was not really good.
Mhm.
However, they grew up and they became more and more quality oriented, and their level now compete with Western CDMOs. And for all our next selection, it will be, I can tell you, a major blocking because in this Biosecure Act, you have to be completely transparent what it is said, but what is between corridors as well. So you have a
Mm.
list of companies in this Biosecure Act, but why this Biosecure Act? The most important thing is that US, they are afraid about two things. The first one is that if we develop something in China, that because China is not very regardant to the intellectual property, in particular if the company is partially owned by the Chinese state, and they are afraid that a technology from United States is swallowed by China at the end because they don't respect that. The other reason, it's a supply reason, because if you produce in China and tomorrow China invade Taiwan and US, they block that, they don't want that, for example, 10 million of those of life-saving products or vaccines are blocked in China due to the war.
Mm.
So it's really a geopolitical weapon to repatriate massively capacities in United States. As well, with the new Trump administration, there is another phenomenon of conservatism where it will favorize, I would say, everything made in United States or in Europe at least. And clearly, it will
Mm.
be the new trend to repatriate and to not have, like in the past, happy globalization where we were all the world one in a small village. India was exchanging with Europe, US with China, etc. Now we see more a world like the rise of the empire. Finally, you have a block for United States, a block for
Mm.
China, a block for India, and I want to say all the decision will impact us. So at Valneva, as you mentioned, we sign a major contract with the US Army, so we don't want to make it's our major client. We don't want, in particular, what is the US Army. We don't want to make US not happy with that. So this Biosecure Act and this selection of future Chinese partner will have a major impact at
Mm.
Valneva, definitely.
Presumably that means that you'll be wanting to build up your network specifically within the United States. Would that be one of the outcomes?
Definitely yes, in the United States or Europe for products that are in high income countries. Definitely
Yeah.
yes.
That's unless Europe gets slapped with tariffs as well, I suppose.
Yes.
How do you see the vaccine manufacturing landscape evolving more generally around supply chain resilience and sustainability come into it? How are you thinking about the next 3 to 4 years?
At the moment, I see an increasing level of externalization, not only for small structure like us at Valneva, but for Big Pharma, because Big Pharma, initially, I would say 20 years or 30 years ago, they used CDMO when they wanted to decrease the price, basically. So for a product at the end of the life cycle, they took a CDMO. Sometimes they accommodate with a lower quality than internally, but due to the fact they know the product, they were experienced more than 10 years, they have a dedicated team for that, it was acceptable. Now, some CDMOs, they became more expert than Big Pharma internally, and sometimes it is with CDMO faster and less expensive than Big Pharma internally. So I want to say more and more you see Big Pharma externalizing. For vaccines, it is true that I would say we'll externalize much more, but sometimes very often we have generic CDMOs, but very few CDMOs that are vaccine specialists that have a true expertise for vaccines manufacturing. Because, of course, you can manufacture basic drug product, basic drug substance, etc. So, drug substance is not basic; you have different kind of technology. But I want to mention you an example for drug products. Very often, our vaccines are with aluminium, as adjuvant. It's a specific formulation because, for drug product, I don't know if you have a scientific background, but for drug product, you need to have a double filtration before to fill your product vial per vial. For the aluminium, you cannot double filter that because it's a suspension and everything will be blocked by the filter. So what you need to do is or to make gamma irradiation of the aluminium or an autoclaving of the aluminium and to transfer that without filter to your filling tank before to fill vial per vial. So I don't want to say I won't say it's a rocket science technology, but it's a know-how. You need to be experienced with that because you need to assure the aseptic transfer without double filter. You need to assure the homogeneity with the mixing because it's a suspension as well. You don't have a peristatic pump and it complexifies, I want to say, the process itself. And when you list the CDMO who can do that, very few CDMO finally can do that. So, you know that vaccines, everybody use that in their life. So it's this kind of things because historically vaccines were made internally by Big Pharma, Now there are more smaller structure as well, and pharma are externalizing much more. I know that, for example, I requested that recently to some CDMOs, and they told me, no, but you are not the only one. More and more Big Pharma and biotech are requesting this expertise for aluminium. So now to assure the supply chain, it is a lack of, I don't want to say expertise, but a lack of specialized know-how on vaccine development and manufacturing, which is lacking, and a lack of capacities because you know that the production in pharma is growing up. We are externalizing much more, so it will be the future. And as well, it follows two trends where I would say the world population is growing. In the meantime, the population in LMIC countries, as we mentioned, increase its quality of life. So you have all these parameters. You increase the externalization. You increase the number of vaccines that need to be supplied. Plus, you need to have the right expertise. Sometimes it's not simple to select a partner for vaccines manufacturing.
Is sustainability, which has become such a key priority for many pharma companies over the last few years, do you see that continuing? Certainly when you look at what's happening in the US, it feels as though those sorts of drill, baby, drill kind of sentiment. Do you think that sustainability is going to be as high a priority as it has been?
For us, so it became a major priority. So in pharma, I can tell you that 5 years ago it was a nice to have criteria, nothing more. Since 2 or 3 years, I see that becoming a key criteria and now an eliminating criteria. So it means that in our partner selection, if a partner doesn't respect the ESG rules based on a ESG assessment or audit, it can be discarded, even if they are very good, not so expensive, etc. It's something that completely changed, and it's linked as well to the Nasdaq index, because Nasdaq index, if your company want to be financed, you need to comply to several, I would say, financial outcomes first, but you have your ESG scoring as well, who assess all your outcomes regarding it, and you need to be completely transparent. And more you are compliant, more you will get investment. So at the moment, it changed nothing, because that Mr. Trump sometimes said a lot of things, so maybe they will do that internally, but it doesn't change what we do internally. It won't change that now we need to respect ESG. It doesn't change that if you want to be financed, you will need to respect ESG. So sometimes from politicians, you have more promise than acts. So maybe from his part, if he wants to drill, he will drill, but it doesn't change what we will do in pharma, for
Yeah,
sure.
I guess particularly if you are in such a multinational situation, if you're going to be able to operate within the EU and other countries, you need to maintain that level of sustainable quality anyway.
Definitely.
Finally, Julian, what advice would you give to other emerging leaders within biopharma external manufacturing who are trying to navigate this increasingly complex landscape? I wonder what advice or best practices you could share that helps you.
My advice is not only to embrace, I'll say, a technical leadership or hard skill, but to embrace adaptability and continuous learning. I want to
Hmm.
say you need to stay aware about industry trends, regulatory change, technical advancement. So you need to be curious, to be adaptable, and to be, I would say, to be completely in a mindset where you can change what you are convinced of at the end, and to change your perspective. So build stronger relationship with partners and stakeholders, because as I told you, and I will repeat that, it's a very small world. So if you are mean with someone, they will know you, and maybe they can repeat that. So it's really important to be, to have a high level of ethical behavior, because a partner that you trust, where you can build a trustful relationship, it's because he's ethical, because it is someone you can give him your project, you can give him money, and he will deliver you something. As well, you need to foster a culture of innovation within your team. You need to, I want to say, sometimes to be, I want to say, a little bit to be, as I mentioned before, that you can change your perspective, you can change your convictions, you can change what you are convinced of, and if you embrace the culture of innovation within your team, they will be more motivated, because now, in particular, young generation. So I don't know. Sometimes they call the generation Z, Alpha. I don't know all these names, but really they want what is the most one of the biggest concern from them is to we mentioned the environment, of course, but it's to have a meaningful job, to know that, for example, if they prepare in the morning, they have an impact in the world. And it's not only to, like in the past, for example, sometimes, and it's not a judgment that I am making, because it can be very honorable, it can be very good, but it's not like in the past, where you were always in the same job, doing things sometimes you don't even understand, or you were, I want to say, in a silo environment. Their new generation, they want to have a meaning in their life, and it is, if you bring this culture of innovation, it's something that is important. But most importantly, I will say that we need to remain committed for the goals of improving the global health, because we don't. It's important as well, but we don't produce iPhone, we don't produce AI, we don't produce cars. we are improving the global health, and I think it's something very noble, and we always need to keep that in our minds finally, and it's very important. So as well, if I can say a last advice to the new leaders, it's as well to have a good knowledge on general culture, because we had one of our former president in France, General de Gaulle. He said that the general culture is the weapon of a leader, and by general culture you can say to not only work in silo in pharma industry, but we talk about the geopolitical impact, the cultural gaps, etc. And if you have a general culture, it's something you can more easily approach than if you are only focused to your environment.
It's been a fascinating interview, Julien. Thank you so much for your time. And we're looking forward, of course, to you speaking at CDMO Live in May in Rotterdam, continuing the conversation there.
Perfect. It will be a pleasure. So thank you for your interview. I appreciated the questions, and I want to say the transparency between us, and I think it's nice to exchange for such a topic. Yeah, thank you.
Merci beaucoup.
Experience the future of contract manufacturing at CDMO Live 2025. Join us at the World Trade Centre Rotterdam on May the 7th and 8th, 2025 for an exclusive event that brings together the sharpest minds in biopharma outsourcing. For 2 days filled with market insights, best practices and partnering. Early bird tickets are now available, so head to cdmolive.com to download the agenda and to book your ticket.